Okay, I believe everybody should be seeing that right about now. And what you're looking at is a piece by Kandinsky. Um, the interesting thing about the beginning of last century, not the 2000s, but 1900 up till 1999, was everybody started breaking away from realism, started pushing into abstract art. Now, abstract art kind of came from the artwork that was being imported from Africa, came from a bunch of different other belief systems. But when they started to see these African masks that had distorted shapes, they started to find them really beautiful. And they thought, well, if we could do that with imagery, we could create something fresh and exciting. So there are many different subcategories to abstract art. But abstract art really can be broken down to if you don't know what the heck it is, it could be lumped in as abstract. Kandinsky, it was all about the elements, and it seemed like he favored all the elements. You see line, you see shape, you see color, you see pattern. Well, not so much, well, it's an attempt at pattern. Some of this modeledness comes off, reads to the eye almost as texture. Whereas you get Franz here, and it's just texture due to the fact that he's just messing with the oil paint. He's smearing it around. There's a distorted face in there with manga-sized eyeballs. This is almost a very frightening image. Well, it is a frightening image, and it looks like it was created by an unhinged mind. The other part that doesn't help is when you start really staring at these legs, they start turning into hooves. So you get this idea that this might represent the devil, or it might represent the god Pan, who was kind of the god of all pleasures. So what is it? Well, it's abstract, so it can be whatever it means to you. And that's the one thing that people don't usually talk about, is we all come to an image with our own background, with our experiences in life, all the things we've ever seen, all the things we've ever witnessed, and all those things that we call that our cognitive map. Well, everybody has a different one because everybody's experienced different things. My idea of family growing up and family dinners with my mom's side of the family, strictly Southern Illinois Polish. So the foods that we ate there were different from my dad's Italian side of the family. You have a different cognitive map growing up in your household because of your ethnic background. So certain things seem very familiar and comforting to you, whereas they would seem very different to me. Maybe not uncomforting, but just different. I don't have the emotional connection with some of the stuff that you've lived through because I didn't live through it. Anyway, that whole cognitive map, that whole bundle of experiences in your life is what you bring to an image when you look at it. So that image, in a way, is having a reaction that is unique with each person that looks at it. And it really changes depending on how long you look at it. So your relation to an image is very much a relationship. Could be good, could be bad, could change over time, almost like Jackson Pollock. And they're all about how paint lands on a piece of paper. Now, technique, in this case, is how well you throw the paint. So for some people, that's, exciting. I get to throw the paint. How well can you throw the paint? Well, how much have you practiced throwing the paint? We definitely don't see any imagery in here. We don't see it's a puppy. We don't see a person. They did studies with this type of art, And they basically found that some people find it very soothing because of the patterns that the guy used when he was throwing almost seem musical at times, like he was conducting. He said he was trying to recreate the American Indian sand paintings, but the American Indian sand paintings are meticulous. They're really thought out. They're very detailed. Uh, They're hard to do. This seems way more loose. His painting before that time period, I actually like better. I feel like I can relate to that kind of thing much easier than I can relate to the action or the splatter field paintings. All right. Color field painting. This is all about, in this case, color juxtaposed to other colors, shapes and colors. There was a point where Matisse, and I know we've talked about Matisse, some of you guys may have a hard time remembering what his stuff looked like. He got to a point in his life where he felt the only two elements that were important were color and shape. And that's kind of what you're seeing reproduced here. Whereas if you move on to Mark Rothko's paintings, these are also color field paintings. And these were huge. I think these were like, 10 foot by 8 foot, something like that. He felt that all of his paintings were a reflection of what you were feeling inside. So whatever this color would do to your emotion, that's the legitimate relationship you had with this. In the case of yellow, kind of happy, Now, do I find it amazingly interesting? No, I find it kind of boring. But he said you were supposed to meditate upon his art and it would change your mood. So, if you stared at this long enough, supposedly you would become happier. Sometimes I'm happier talking about his work than I am actually looking at his work. Flip onto this color field painting, you have a much different version of that work. The mood has changed. It's no longer bright and happy. He did a series of these for a church right before he died. And interestingly enough, our action field painter Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko both met untimely deaths. Jackson Pollock drank a lot because he didn't need a whole lot of skill to do his painting. No, that's mean. He drank a lot, and he ended up driving the car off a cliff. So that's how his life ended early. Mark Rothko was asked one day what would be the most perfect painting, and he felt all paintings should be a reflection of the person viewing them, right? The yellow one made you happy, the dark one made you sad. He said to the interviewer, the most perfect painting you could ever have would be a blank canvas. And the interviewer said, why? He said, because then the artist would not be involved. That everything that you saw as a viewer in that blank canvas would be led by you, would be a pure reflection of yourself. Shortly after that, he shot himself through the head. My theory is when you feel the best painting you can ever do is no painting, it tends to kill your motivation and life goals. All right, moving on. So far, and I'm sorry, it's a blurry one. This is another Mark Rothko with a little bit more shape than just straight up color. The one thing every one of these abstract painters have in common is you see a heavy influence with the elements and principles. You may start to see realistic things in there, like in the case of Julian Schnabel. Some of this might be actually his painting skill. Some of this is when he takes and he paints over an older image and then ends up selling that for millions of dollars. My theory about abstract art is my theory about everything in life. 90% of everything is garbage. It just is. 90% of the TV shows that you flip through, you don't want to watch them. They're no good. 90% of the music on the radio does nothing for you. But that 10% that's out there that makes a meaningful impact is that 10% you're searching for that's going to make your life better or make your life different. So that's kind of the garbage rule of life. That's the garbage rule of art. Some of these abstracts are going to do nothing for you. Some of them are going to be a little more challenging to your brain. Some of them you might even end up liking. As we go to yet another Julian Schnabel. What was interesting about this one, he busted up a bunch of paints. He glued it to these canvases. He glued the canvases together. There's tree branches there. There's all kinds of weird stuff on top of his canvas. And then he painted over the top of that. Do I like it? I like it better than a lot of the other stuff I've seen today. And I chose these images. So now what does this have to do with our practice piece? Well, the 5/6s or the drawing 3 will see when they're watching their pastel guy on the video that I put in your announcements. He basically just does abstract shapes and then he plays with the color. I'm going to allow you guys to do something like that. I'm expecting it by Friday. All right. You can use a quarter sheet of your paper. Doesn't have to be real big. I just want to see that you put a little practice into using those oil pastels because honestly, oil pastels are very different texture-wise than anything else you've ever used. For my 5/6s, I'm going to have you do an image that is also an abstract image. How much of it and what elements you want to focus on are up to you. If you want to focus on color and shape, that's fine. If you want to focus on line and action, you can do that too. I'd appreciate a little more control and not so much scribble. Or if you want to take and do all kinds of shapes, all kinds of colors, I would like you guys to do this in the chalks. Now, if you go into the chalks and you're like, I cannot stand chalk, because there are people that just don't like chalk. And I understand that because as much as I love charcoal, the blackness, the silkiness of it, working with charcoal is really hard for me because I'm left-handed and I drag across the paper. So I end up moving my hand across the paper. I smear everything. I would use paper-wise. I give you guys, how many big sheets of white paper did I give you guys? I give you 3. I'm trying to remember. It's been a couple of weeks. 3? Okay. So what I would do with one of the sheets of white paper is I'd hamburger that sucker, fold it in half, maybe fold it in a half again the other way so that you have 4 pieces, and I would cut those. Now, if you fold them real tight, you can actually tear them, but you got to fold them back and forth a couple times, and then you got to hold. It's a technique thing. If you can't do that, use a razor blade, use a pair of scissors. I would just use one chunk of that, 1/4 of one of those sheets, and then that'll give you 3/4. We can do a couple of other practice things on as the semester moves on. We are still waiting really for supplies to be delivered. You know what? I would do one cool one you're happy with. Now, if you end up doing one, you're like, that's horrible. You do some abstracts and you'll get to the point where you're like, you know what? These are not bad. These are actually really fun. You're not interested about making an image so much as just playing with the materials and creating elements and principles, right? You got line, you got color, you got form, you got texture, you got pattern. You can throw in some of the principles like balance if you want. Remember when we did the balance sheet first year, where whatever we drew on one side, we drew on the other side, we made a mirror image. Technically, you could say that is almost an abstract piece. So I would just play with the materials, and I'll have other presentations to do as the weeks go on. So, we'll talk about political art on Wednesday, and we'll talk about political art on Friday. But hopefully all your abstracts will be done, or your abstract will be done, and you can send me a picture of it and I can grade it. And then week after this, you guys can pop right into your political image. But I want to give you time to practice with this material, and I want to give you time to think about your political image. So we'll talk more about that on Wednesday, and that's about it. Anybody got any questions? No? Okay, cool. I'll stop sharing my screen. Boom, boom.